Hey, I wanted to start this conversation about emotional intelligence from an absolutely beautiful spot that also captured where I am at this moment in my own efforts to manage my emotions and to just be able to talk this through together from a Christian perspective. At this moment in my life, there is a great deal on my plate, but the fact that I'm able to be standing in this beautiful location on overlooking the Pacific Ocean, with just so much beauty surrounding it is a tangible example of how when you call out to God with where you are, He answers. And sometimes we think as believers that if we are having an emotional response, that it's a bad thing, but it's really not, because we get to see the beauty in God's gifting when we're honest and authentic with Him and tell Him, yo, God, I'm struggling. Dear God, I'm hurting. I'm confused. I'm worrying. I'm sad. I'm anxious. He knows it already, so trying to hide it from Him won't do you any good. But to be able to say, Lord, I'm struggling and I need to see you in my life in a very tangible way, in a way that I can't even miss it, like smack me upside the head kind of way, He'll do it. So hopefully, as we go through the rest of this webinar on emotional intelligence, you will keep this in mind. Be blessed.
So let's talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence and what it means and how it pertains to wellness, how it benefits you in your walk as a family member, as an individual, as a believer, just what emotional intelligence and the role of emotions can play in our complete lives. And so what we will spend some time doing as part of this session is creating a definition for emotional intelligence and looking at the key qualities that apply to us each individually. We are going to explore the balance between emotional and spiritual wellness as part of our overall health. We're only as effective in our Christian walk, in the work before us, in our careers, in our schoolwork, whatever our goals are and our life's passions are, we're only as effective as our wellness allows us to be. And with that in mind, we're going to identify some practical ways in which we can support emotional wellness, not only in ourselves as individuals, but also in others. So when you think about emotional intelligence, to break it down in a way that's understandable for everyone, emotional intelligence is the ability to manage your emotions, be aware of your emotions, while also being aware of how your emotions impact others and create an emotional response for them as well. So, in other words, there is a self-awareness that you have about your buttons, uh, your pinpoints or pressure points. But also you recognize that everything isn't about you, that you can understand that others sometimes walk in an emotional space as well. And you're aware of that. And because you are empathetic towards others, then you also make adjustments in how you respond both to them and for yourself. So think of emotional intelligence as a tree, right? And a tree has lots of branches. A healthy tree has lots of branches and leaves and buds and foliage, and it's able to regenerate itself year after year. So emotions play that kind of role in our life. We have a range of emotions that we experience. Some are really great and we wish we could spend time in that space all the time, but it's not realistic. And some are very painful. And then in the middle, there's this whole host of other um, emotions that we experience based on whatever is going on in our life at the moment. So emotions in general are important and they're meaningful to our life. I like to talk about emotional intelligence, particularly from a faith perspective, because sometimes we get mixed messages from the faith community, or whether you call it the Christian community, or however you flow with that, whatever label you put on your walk with God. Sometimes we get the impression that emotions are bad. And I like to remind people that there are examples of healthy emotions and unhealthy emotions throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Jesus wept. Jesus expressed joy. Jesus got so angry, right, at the people in the temple that he turned over tables. Jesus cut up, if you will. So if Jesus could be upset with the things that are going on at the time, if he could experience grief, if he could experience sadness and disappointment and joy, then if we spend our time trying to be Christ-like, we can understand how we were created to experience those things too. God made us and he knows how he made us. And so people who have a high degree of emotional intelligence, meaning people who are cool with their emotions and how emotions are playing out in any encounter or any relationship, those individuals can appreciate the emotions they are experiencing at any given time. So it's not like you're being fake and there's a switch that you flip on and off. It's very real. It's very authentic, because you'll know if you're being fake, and so will other people. But in the process of doing that, you also recognize that those emotions have a meaning in the greater worldview. We can't go around throwing temper tantrums, especially when we're not 2 years old. The world would think a particular way about us. And quite frankly, we probably will have earned whatever view they develop of us if we are 15, 30, 40, 80, still throwing tantrums. But what we learn to do is navigate the impact on our own emotions and how they affect others. So that's when we're at our healthiest. We can appreciate emotions. We don't have to hide from them. We don't have to run from them. We recognize that what we're experiencing emotionally has meaning, and then we try to create buffers or ways in which those emotions don't overrule our relationships with others. So then what does it mean to live holistically and emotionally well? Because that's part of what we're talking about in managing the mountains, overcoming whatever mountains crop up in our lives. Events happen, things happen, and there is an emotional response to it. We already talked about that. And so when we are unable to express our emotions to our families. So if you're a child and you can't express yourself in your family group because your family doesn't allow space for that. If you are in a relationship with someone, you're a couple, or even your work relationships, if you can't express what is important to you, then it becomes emotionally stifling. And so those types of things are not healthy, because in our overall life, when we look at our life holistically, we're not just one way. We're not just a parent. We're not just a child. We're not just a daughter. We're not just a son. We're not only a grandparent. We are students and teachers and workers and preachers and singers and all these beautiful things that we get the chance to do based on our gifts and how we're created and our passions and all those wonderful things. And so those extra parts are what make our life valuable. If you remember, the Bible talks about how, like, yeah, the body is one entity, but it has many different parts to it that do many different things. And so, in order to have a full life, you're not just one way. So you don't just live your life in church, and you go to the doctor because you have to take care of your physical health. You do things that make you feel good or give you comfort psychologically, whether it's having coffee with your friends or going for a run. But those things that help contribute to our psychological health. Or you talk to somebody, you talk to a therapist. I'm a counselor, so I'm all about people talking, talking out their stuff. It's okay and it's safe. Likewise, we're impacted by the world around us. So that's a sociological impact on us. And so when we live holistically, we understand that there's a biological, a psychological, a social, an emotional, a spiritual component to our life. And all of them matter. We may spend more time with one than another, but they all matter. And so when you really break it down, if you wanted to focus or center on, the most important four, think of it in terms of your body and how your body is feeling, if it's hurting, right? If you're overweight, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not exercising, if you haven't walked for a while, if you drink too much coffee, if you eat too much sugar, there's so many things that can have an impact on your body. Then it impacts your mind as well, because it impacts how you feel about yourself. And we like, in our country, we like to talk about body shaming, and that is not a good thing. It is a form of bullying. At the same time, there is a need to be healthy in what you tell yourself about how you feel about your body, whatever that may be. If you're under a lot of stress, that's both a physical and a psychological impact. So your body is stressed, and then just because of how the body is made with hormones and hormones that get released under stress and all of that, you can actually gain weight from being too stressed out, just from how your body reacts. Likewise, stress has an impact on your mind. And if your mind is in this place where you can't really nurture it, then it has an impact on your soul, which I look at your soul as the thing that drives you every day, that causes you to get up, to keep going, to keep believing, to keep having faith, to keep working, because you know that there is something here on this earth for you to do before you leave here. Likewise, if those other three are off, your spirit is going to be off. You're not going to feel very good about the life or the world in which you live. And so, like when you think of John, third John chapter 1 verse 2, where it says, "Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul." And I put that one with the body because it is a prayer and it's a petition, and it's giving a blessing that all will go well with your body, that you'll be in good health, that you'll be purposeful about that, recognizing that it impacts everything else. Likewise, life and death is in the power of the tongue. I tell myself that all the time, and I tell young people that all the time. So like Proverbs 18:21, like write that on your journals, in your notebook, put it in your phone, make it your IG status, like just so that you can remember that death and life is in the power of the tongue. And if you feed yourself and feed others emotionally good stuff, right, then you're going to get back good fruit. And if you feed negative stuff, then you're going to get back negative fruit. We get back what we put out there. Emotionally, we get back what we put out there. Have you ever been around someone and you call them an energy drain, or maybe you don't like their vibe? They're just a lot of work to be around. That's because your mind and your soul and your spirit can't handle being with that person because it's just draining you. And it doesn't mean that we turn our backs on people who are in need, but what it does mean is that we have to take care of ourselves as we take care of others. Remember, it's a lot like the rule on the airplane. You have to put on your mask first before you can help somebody else. And then when you think about the soul, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, like in 1 Corinthians 12:12, and it says, "For as the body is one, and it has many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one." And we're the same way in Christ. And so, yeah, we are who we were uniquely designed to be. We are that fearfully and wonderfully made person in God's image. That's what our soul and our spirit desires to be. And so the more intelligent we are at managing our emotions as we're confronted with challenges in our lives that look like mountains, that look like they're insurmountable, the more we're equipped to be able to feed ourselves. So when you think about emotional intelligence in action, what does it look like? So there's a personal piece and there's a social piece. Likewise, there's a part that deals with how aware we are and what we recognize in ourselves and in others, and then how we regulate those things. So in terms of our personal selves, we have to be self-aware and we have to manage ourselves. That's when we're at our individual best in terms of emotional intelligence. And when we're with others, we're aware of what's going on around us, and we can empathize with that. We can be compassionate. We can show concern. We can care. We may even grieve or ache. There's a lot going on in our country right now that requires us to be socially aware, that requires us to tap into our emotional intelligence with regards to others. And so when we can recognize what's going on for others, then that makes us more competent, more effective in that particular area. And we can manage things socially in that particular area. So, like, sometimes people think that we have to agree with everything that goes on in another person's life, and we don't. We absolutely do not. But we're called to recognize it, and we're called to stand in support the best way that we can stand in support, while also managing the social context for ourselves, managing the social environment for ourselves. So, for young people, right? If you see your friend being bullied, yeah, you do want to jump in and you do want to say something. But you might not want to jump in fighting and risk getting kicked out of school because you were so angered by what was happening that you decided to handle it yourself. There is a different way. Same thing for adults. Like, as adults, we don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize our livelihoods or our family's ability to grow and be prosperous. And sometimes that leaves us as being less of the world citizen that we're called to be in the Great Commission. So we all have challenges. We all have work to do with this. And this is a model to help you think through that and think through where you are. So, if you looked at emotional intelligence as though it were a pyramid, you would see that most of the work with being emotionally intelligent is with you as an individual. It's on your plate. So you have to be aware. You have to manage yourself. You have to set direction for yourself. And when you're able to do that effectively without fear or without embarrassment or without being self-centered or any other emotion, right, that might come up that can keep you standing still instead of moving forward and acting in the way in which you believe you're called to be and according to your gifting and all these beautiful things about us as human beings, then you're able to express compassion towards other people. And that's what empathy is. And that's the breakthrough that you want to have as an individual. So you can't get over your mountain if you don't understand yourself. If you're stuck at the bottom of the pyramid, if you're not aware of what causes you to be in the positions that you're in. Sometimes it's our own behavior. Sometimes it's nothing to do with us at all. But we have to be aware of that. We can't take on things that aren't ours to take on. At the same time, we do have to take on what is ours. We have to own it, as we like to say. Being around a happy-go-lucky person is hard when your heart is breaking. And I think we've all been in that place before. We want to be happy. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to make that a goal. Emotional intelligence allows us to recognize when those around us are hurting and help them as best we can to not hurt, even if it's just acknowledging, hey sis, I see that you're hurting. What can I do for you? But you don't keep celebrating, hey, life is good for me, too bad for you. That's like rubbing a salt in our brother's or our sister's wound, or like stealing their jacket and leaving them in the cold. That's not good emotional intelligence. And I would argue that it's not good holistic living either. So when you think about emotional intelligence, here's some things that you're responsible for, right? Going back to self-awareness, self-management, self-direction. You're responsible for developing positive habits, being the best person you can be. That's what that means. You're responsible for understanding your feelings and your actions. No blaming somebody else for what happens. You're responsible for being a person of your word. Whatever your agreements are, if they're to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your church, to your job, to people you don't even know. Keep your agreements. Let your words mean something. This is kind of a stretch for some Christians, but you're responsible for putting yourself first. If you don't think there was a logic to airlines developing a process for survival that says, in the event of an emergency, these little yellow cups with a string on it are going to drop out of the ceiling. Put your mask on first, then help the person with you, or then help the person next to you. We're not helpful if we're not healthy. So put yourself first. You're responsible for the goals you set. It's your life. You're driving the bus. You have a destination for your life. And my guess is your goal is not to drive the bus off the cliff, or at least that's what I hope. So you can't blame anyone else. You can't make anyone else responsible for your goals. You can't even take other people along necessarily on your goals. Sometimes people will try to change your goals for you. Have you ever been super excited about a decision you made and you shared it with someone? Maybe it's your bestie or your spouse or your parent or your mentor, and they responded in a way that totally deflated your excitement about what you were planning to do? It's okay to sometimes keep your goals to yourself until you're ready to release them. Babies aren't born into the world before it's their time. When you're birthing a goal, you have to be emotionally intelligent to know when to share it, when to be patient, and when to celebrate the arrival. And then the choices you make. The title of this is Overcoming Mountains Using Emotional Intelligence. Unfortunately, we live in a society that sometimes creates this environment where we beat ourselves up more than we should. We hold ourselves accountable for more than we should. We take on more ownership for things that we should. We are responsible as individuals for the choices we make individually. Since this is a young life function and it's all about relationship with God, then we're all expecting to go to heaven one day, right? Like, we believe that. If we've accepted that Jesus is the Son of God and He's the key to connecting us with God, and because we believe in Jesus, we believe that we will have a resting place with God, we're trying to get someplace, then we're responsible for that choice. We're all going to have to answer for our choices when we see Jesus, when we get to heaven. Um, so while we're here on earth doing our work, being the best humans we can be, that's our choice. We get to decide that. And what we don't want to do is make more of a mountain out of issues than we should. So, I've been talking for a long time. Now some work is on you. We talked about things that we're responsible for. I want you to make a list of things that are not your responsibility. Sometimes being empathetic, we try to take on too much of other people's stuff and other people's problems. And that's the same sometimes whether we're a teenager or we're a young adult, we're a working adult, if we're a mom or a dad or sister or brother, sometimes we just try to take on other people's stuff. What are some things that you are not responsible for? Make a list of 5 things. That's your homework for today. Make a list of 5 things, at least 5 things, that are not your responsibility. A really good friend of mine has a saying that I've picked up that I've had to apply to my life to set healthy boundaries to keep myself emotionally in check. And it is, not my monkey, not my circus. So when things come up and I feel myself about to jump in and take over or take it on, I stop and I tell myself, Nikita, not your monkey, not your circus. And I let the ringmaster of whatever that event is handle it. So here's your reality check. Now that we've gone through this, what does it mean for you to be emotionally well and managed? What does that look like for your life? We know what our habits are. We know what our routines are. Sometimes we like to pretend like we don't, but we are really good at looking in the mirror. We just look away because we don't like what we see. So what does it mean for you? And then, do you have a better understanding now about the connection between emotional intelligence and how it creates these mountains in our lives? How it leads or can possibly lead to self-defeat? Self-defeat is a mountain that we have to overcome. And we are self-defeated by our choices, by the things that we say to ourselves, by allowing ourselves to wallow in a negative emotional place. It doesn't mean that we can't experience them sometimes. That's just unrealistic. But we can't stay there. We can't make pity and unhappiness and anger and frustration and bitterness and anxiety. We can't make them our home or a regular routine in our lives. We can't dress ourselves in negative emotions all the time. And then, what is your connection between emotional intelligence, a positive attitude, and motivation? Because at the end of the day, we have things that we want to achieve. We have a way in which we see our lives playing out. And it's not wallowing in self-pity. So what keeps you motivated? What are you willing to do to stay motivated? And how are you going to make it work? This is your plan. I gave you the setup. Now the work is on you and making your plan individually. And then how can you support each other in the family? The more emotionally well you are individually, as a family member, the more emotionally healthy your family is going to be. Isn't that a wonderful gift to have, to give to each other? I know this is short. If you have questions, email me. Feel free. Email me at thegobackproject@gmail.com. If you want to discuss something, if you have questions, if you need a referral, any way in which I can help you. And even if you want to say, yo, Nikita, you know what, that was pretty good, but I disagree with that. I'll even take that. I take all the feedback. I take all the discussion. I take all the questions. I look so forward to hearing from you. And I pray that something that I said blessed you in some kind of way. Thank you.